Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip Trickle Flow Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. And Tony, I'm super excited for our guest today. We have Nikki Naab-Levy. She's a strength and nutrition coach for women who feel like they've tried everything only to end up injured, frustrated, or stuck in a cycle of tracking, restricting, and starting over with nothing to show for it. And she's honestly one of the most fun people I know. So welcome, Nikki. I'm so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to do this.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Nikki. I'm excited to talk money and finance and that sort of thing, but nutrition and fitness and all those things, big place in my world. I do coaching myself of youth. So I'm super excited to learn from you today.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And I think I've had a lot of business lives, so this should be interesting.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
Yes.
I can relate to that.
Yes, I think we all can. And Nikki, I've worked with Nikki for a really long, probably like a decade, I'm going to say. So you have had a lot of business lives, Nikki. So let's actually start with that a little bit. Like, tell us more about your business today. And while you've had a lot of iterations, so we don't expect you to like give us the whole Game of Thrones style backstory, but I'd love to know like what feels really different for you now compared to when you started.
Absolutely. So if we start now, primarily the two things I do is I do one-on-one nutrition coaching, and then I have an app-based strength program. And some of the people I work with the app-based strength program get more like customized like workouts, that sort of thing. I work a lot with people with hypermobility and chronic conditions. It's not necessarily a niche I would have chosen. It chose me because I had a lot of challenges with that. And I realized that the information in that space was great. Like for lack of a better word, it's just there's a lot of like misinformation and fear mongering that makes people feel like they can't do things. And that really frustrates me because that's not really my personality type. And then, with nutrition coaching, a lot of people want support with body composition, but like they're basically tired of crash dieting and feeling like crap all the time. So that's what I do now. But if we go back to when I was like, oh geez, 19, I started teaching group fitness. I got my first Pilates mat certification because actually it's just a really funny story, but this kind of ties into like having a lot of business lives. Like right before I went to college, I took a lot of mat Pilates classes, and the instructors at my gym were like, you should teach. And I was like, sure. And so I did a weekend mat certification and then like went off to college, came back for a 6-week break. And the Pilates teacher who did most of the classes there had actually run away to Jamaica with the gym manager and stolen all this company money. And I walked in to take
Okay,
class.
now what we're talking about on the podcast has totally changed.
To derail us, but like literally, this is how I started my career. This is the first class I ever taught. I walked in to take class. The group fitness manager there knew me because I had been taking classes there since I was 16. And she said, "You're certified, right?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Can you teach?" And I said, "Okay." And I walked up to the front of the class and taught my first class ever, not knowing I was going to do it with zero preparation. And
Oh
it
my
was a bunch of
gosh.
little old ladies, and I had no microphone because I couldn't figure out how to use it. And they just screamed, "Speak up," the whole hour.
Wait,
I love that. That's just the epitome of doing it on the fly, and sometimes you just got to make it happen.
You get better, right? So I was like, oh, that wasn't terrible. And then I started teaching group fitness at college when I went back to school, declared a second degree in exercise science because apparently journalism wasn't enough. And yeah, moved out to Seattle. And that was sort of how I ended up here teaching Pilates and group fitness. And then since then, I've done a whole bunch of other things. I've ghostwritten a book for a yoga teacher. I have done marketing for a Pilates equipment company. I have had a different iteration of a membership that was all like group fitness style Pilates classes. I've taught kettlebell courses. I've done, if it exists within my industry, I've probably done it in some way, is what it feels like at this point.
As you're doing all these different things, do you stop one thing and start the other, or are you having overlap?
No, I definitely have overlap, and not usually the overlap comes from my desire of I become interested in something new. And I have a little too much like sensibility to just abandon what I'm doing, even if I'm a little bored with it. So what happens is I kind of end up starting a new sort of side hustle that's tangential to my current hustle. I don't know if hustle's the right word, but we're gonna go with it. And then I sort of start migrating more towards the thing I'm more interested in until that becomes the main, and then I can phase out the thing I was doing before.
I love that. I need to learn about the phasing out part, but I relate, to as you get these different interests and yeah, it's tough to stop doing something you love, but it's tough to not start something that's intriguing.
Yeah. And I'm always driven as much by my interest in what I'm doing as like the potential, if you will, like quote unquote financial gain. Because, like, to me, money is more about I want to have enough to be able to do the things I enjoy. I don't really care if I could make a lot of it doing something I didn't like. If that was the case, I wouldn't be in the fitness industry. I'd go do something else, like be an accountant, which I have half a master's in and I discovered is not for me.
You have so many things. And that brings me to a question. It was actually my second question, so you anticipated it, but you just brought up a bit about your relationship with money and how you view that within like the fitness context, within your business context. So has that changed over time? Like, how did you feel about that when you were 19, teaching thrust into group fitness classes without much experience to now?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of us, I have and I've worked on it, but continue to have what is sometimes like a complicated relationship with money. I grew up in a very affluential area where my parents are both doctors. They are in their 70s and still practicing medicine, which is wild to me, but we'll save that for another day. But I was in an area where like it's not that, I like I said, I grew up in like a very upper middle class neighborhood, but like comparatively to a lot of the people around me and my friends, we didn't have as much money as they did. And so I was always sort of aware of that because you can't not be when you grow up in an area where it's like everything is just kind of handed to you. And I always just sort of felt, well, clearly this level of wealth is not going to be handed to me. So I probably need to be self sufficient to a certain degree. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to have like a small amount of money that I inherited from a rather eccentric grandmother, and we'll just call that emotional alimony. And so I and so I always knew that if I was going to spend it, I was going to need to spend it thoughtfully, either on things I really wanted or things that were really going to support me. And so I've always sort of then played with this idea of like I kind of pretend it's not there. But so like I went to school in Southeast Ohio for less money than it would have cost me to go to college in Virginia in state on 2 scholarships. And then I was like, oh, cool, we're going to work in fitness. Fitness is not lucrative. So if we're going to do that, we need to be thoughtful about how we use this. And so it's always been interesting because I think that's one thing that unfortunately is carried over is there's always a feeling of like there's always money and there's never money. And I'm still, even at almost 40 years old, trying to reconcile that in my own brain.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
talk a little bit about, the where your income streams are. You have an app, you've got your one-on-one coaching.
Yeah.
How does that division kind of break down?
So I would say that the one-on-one coaching is probably my primary income stream if I were to like really sit down and look at the numbers. So really still private clients. The app is what some people might call the air quotes passive income, but it's not passive. I want to be really clear about that. Like it brings in probably about a third of my income for the year easily. But again, I don't know, there's 60 something individuals in there. I'm doing workout updates for them. We're running, like little fitness challenges or little programs or that sort of thing. Right. So I'm always very engaged in it pretty much every day, except for obviously like weekends that I try to take off. So I would say that it's kind of, those are my two primary income streams. But then like right now I'm getting ready to launch a nutrition program, which I originally was going to call a challenge. And then I learned that everyone who follows me hates the word challenge. So it's a program,
Oh, that's interesting.
right?
Why do they hate the word challenge?
I think it's like I came out of the mind body space and there's this really interesting schism between like if you're a fitness person or like a mind body person. And I don't want to generalize or stereotype, but like a lot of the people in the mind body space see fitness as being like very aggressive. And so I think challenge is a fitness word. But if you're working with people who have a kind of poor relationship with exercise because they've had a lot of injury and chronic pain, or they felt forced into doing things that made their body feel worse, right? Or if you come from a space where like there's a lot of words about being gentle and flowing, I think challenge can feel like it doesn't fit into that language very well.
So, so you have these different income streams, right? So you got your one-on-one coaching and you have your app, and then you're going to do a program, which that's, I'm assuming maybe some of the people from the app and maybe some of your coaching base will participate in. How are you finding people for these different channels?
Yeah, so I would say my primary form of selling has always been email marketing. That was like one of the first things, probably right around the time I entered your ecosystem, Melissa, is like everyone was like, you need an email list. And I was like, got it.
And then you ran with it.
Yeah, I guess so.
Your emails are wild and fun. Talk about that. Like because you always have like really eye-catching headlines, and just you're really good at tying into pop culture and being a little controversial. And so tell us about that.
I mean, I think part of it, right, is like there's a side of me that's like very nerdy and is like, cool, carb metabolism. Let's look at it. And then like there is the other 75% of my personality that is trash. Like, what awful TV show can I watch? What throwback show from the millennial or from like millennial era can I watch? Yes, let's watch only the first 2 seasons of the OC for the 18th time, followed by Gossip Girl, followed by some book that's like a bunch of prep school moms who are all going to murder the teacher that one of them had an affair with. And so like, really, that's what I'd prefer to talk about. I think to me, that's oftentimes more interesting than how to activate your glutes in a deadlift. So when I go to write something, I'm always kind of toying with the two sides of my brain, which is like, I really want to tell you about the formula of the 18 thrillers I just listened to on audiobook. But I kind of have to talk to you about something that you've actually signed up for. So I think they're just going to have to live together in this email today.
It's so funny. I mean, one, just what you're saying, but I mean, I have the same thing. I'll go and be talking to someone about remodeling their kitchen, and the next thing I know, I'm talking about yard games, and they're probably like, who is this guy and why is he talking to me about yard games? And you know, it's like what's kind of going to be bursting out of you, even though that's maybe not what people are paying you to be there for.
What makes you stand out?
Yeah, well, yeah, and whether it stand out in a good way or bad way, I guess that. I don't know.
Well, I mentioned specifically for fitness, like you said, Nikki, you have like a very scientific angle to what you do, right? Fitness is like obviously has like a physio angle to it. And that's just a lot for folks to take in. Like, I don't want to hear about how my glutes are being activated. I just want a good butt, like that's so like ultimately, I don't care how that occurs. So if you're telling me about like, a murderous neighborhood of moms who do XYZ whilst telling me how to get a good butt, I'm good with that. I would be your ideal client.
Really? And I mean, I think this is like not to take us into a tangent, but like having worked in the fitness industry for a long time, fitness people are wild. Like we do not live normal lives. Like you want to talk, I'm not going to share the drama, but like you want to talk about like the drama, like the real tea would be like if I were to write a spin-off book based off of people I've worked with at the gym. Right? Like, I mean, the scandal. So I think that's the other thing that's kind of funny to me. It's like we can get so nerdy and technical, but I'm like, oh man, if you saw that person at a bar after a conference, you don't even know. You don't even know. Like it's so I don't know. It's just funny to me when we try to make it so technical and nerdy. And I'm like, we're all kind of crackpots.
See, now that you say that, this validated me. Sorry, Tony. I have to just go on this quick tangent because I've written 15 movies for Lifetime at this point. And do you know how many times I've pitched a fitness story and I always get turned down because they don't believe that it would be that salacious? So now I need to just bring you into my next pitch meeting. Okay. Go ahead, Tony.
So you've got this email list, and it sounds like I need to get on it because it sounds like your emails are interesting. How do you monetize that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, right, it's really, in many ways, traditional funnel. It's like I've got a couple lead magnets at the top. I'm working on SEO right now and actually repurposing my blogs and cleaning them up because I have so much content at this point that, right, as creative as I am, I do need to rein myself in sometimes. So basically, whether people find me through SEO, blogs, through podcasts, through social media, I've got my lead magnets. I lead that into the email list. I try to send weekly-ish emails, and then I do, I don't know, a handful of launches a year. And when I do those launches, then I'm going to talk about a specific thing that I'm promoting in some way with your typical promotional thing, where sometimes if I have the bandwidth, because I also have a 2-year-old now, I will do some sort of, again, I guess it's not a challenge. We're going to call it a mini program moving forward, but I'll do some sort of free live offer that relates to the thing that I'm going to offer. And then I turn that into my series of emails with cart open, cart close. So pretty traditional in that sense of, I'm not reinventing the wheel there at all. If anything, I'm trying to just keep using the same formula, and then I get to be creative in the actual content I'm creating.
Are most of your clients not local, Nikki?
Yeah, most of them are not. More recently, because if you're listening, hi, Lindsay. I have a lovely acupuncturist who I know who is also a client. And so she does sometimes send people to me. So I do a little bit of work with referrals. So some of them are in Port Angeles, for example. I live in Tacoma. But I mean, I've got clients all the way like over in like Ireland and Australia as well. So they're all over the world.
That's so cool because I think, and maybe Tony, you can speak to this too, because you and your wife had owned a fitness business for a bit, or Lindsay was an instructor.
Lindsay was a bar instructor for a while.
Bar instructor.
And then yeah.
She was in that world. But it's so typically contained and localized, that business. It's like you teach your classes, here are your clients. So it's cool that you were able to expand, Nikki, like beyond that local base. Where did that start? Like where did that start where you were attracting people from other places besides like teaching local classes?
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened is, so it's funny, when I started teaching in Pilates studios, everyone was like, you probably need to have your own business. And I was like, ugh, no. I was like, that's too much work. I'm not doing that. And then I started, basically, I felt really stuck in the studio model. There wasn't any place to expand from. And so I ended up doing sort of like learning this specialized form of foam rolling that no one else was teaching at the time. This was like back in 2012. So I started teaching workshops. And then suddenly next thing I knew, I had a quote unquote business that then I had to hire an accountant 2 years later to help me fix all the taxes because I really screwed that up because I didn't know what I was doing. I was like 25 and I was an idiot. So that it kind of started with me there. And then I just sort of realized that I'm not a very good employee. As much as I don't like conflict, I'm also a terrible employee. And so that resulted in me essentially getting a live work loft that I lived in. That was, the bottom part was like a little 250 square foot studio. And then there was a giant bunk bed ladder. I don't think this was up to code, but whatever. That like it was like 13 feet tall. And then there was like a 300 square foot loft that I lived in above it. So that's how I ended up in the studio. I did that for a few years. It was successful. And then I met the person who's now my husband, and he didn't want to live in Seattle. And I was kind of tired of Seattle. And so I was like, oh, I don't want to do this again. So this is my opportunity to do something else. So then I decided I was going to go on the internet. I didn't know what that meant at the time. That was actually when I met you, Melissa. And then I sold my first program as a HIP program.
I remember.
I made $7,000 in the first launch. And I was like, what is this? I like pulled money out of the sky. This is crazy. You're telling me I can make money on the internet with an iPhone and like some emails?
Wait, what's a hip launch?
Well, it was called Hips Don't Lie. And
Yes.
it was
like literally hips.
yeah,
Okay.
literally hips. It was an 8-week
I thought
program
this was-
for hip stiffness and pain. And the reason that I picked it was I ran Facebook ads, and this was when you could run Facebook ads and like they'd work. They would just work
the good
because the
days.
internet wasn't saturated. It was like 2015. And basically no one cared about shoulders and everyone cared about stiff hips. So I was like, cool, I guess I'm selling a hip program.
I thought hips was like some, acronym for
No,
some internet strategy, but you were literally selling hips.
I was
like
literally
it.
selling how to
All
solve
right.
your stiff hips. And it was basically that. I started posting things on Instagram and Facebook and running Facebook ads. And I had a hip program. And then, I was still traveling back to Seattle from Tacoma 2 times a week for my clients. And then COVID happened. And then I was like, cool, I guess I'm going fully online. And now here we are.
Well, aside from the fact that, you started this all literally on hips, it's great that you said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. My life's changing. I'm moving. And you didn't say, I had to figure out what the heck I was going to do. You said, I had this opportunity to change what I was doing. And that mental outlook is, it's pretty powerful. If you're going in saying this is an opportunity with a positive attitude, I think your likelihood of success is much higher. And I mean, you and I are just chatting for the very first time and getting the impression that you kind of have that go get it, positive attitude, and you just kind of leap and assume that there's going to be a net there kind of a thing.
I think to a degree, I think the other thing is that fitness is not a stable career. So it's not like when you're moving around, when you're moving the targets around, at least this is how it's felt for me. I never felt like I was leaving something that was that stable, right? I've never had a quote unquote real job. Like, this is just one of those things about me. I even knew at like the youngest of young ages, I was like, I do not want to sit at a desk. And if we backtrack, when I was 25, I was working in the Pilates studios teaching group fitness. And I was like, this isn't great. Maybe I do need a quote unquote real job. I'm going to go be an accountant. And that's how I don't even know how I got accepted in accounting school, by the way. I'm still trying to figure this out in retrospect. So that was when I was like, I'm going to be an accountant. And I spent a year getting a master's in accounting. And I cried every day and I got almost straight A's. And at the end of 1 year, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go all in on this like fitness thing and I'm just going to make it work. And I think that really, for better or worse, kind of like trying to shove myself as the round hole in the square peg really reiterated to me kind of where my values were and just kind of going like, it's fine. We're just going to have to figure it out. So for me, it's just the pain of being where I don't want to be has always been stronger than the fear of going towards the thing that seems more exciting or new or fun or interesting.
It's funny. I get asked pretty regularly. I have a degree in history and English, and everybody's just like, oh, you don't use your degree or whatever, why aren't you working in a museum or teaching or go to law school or whatever? I guess those are the three options. And so you have your you have your accounting degree, and I guess seemingly, or you don't have your accounting degree, you went to get your master's, you have some experience in that. Seemingly you're not utilizing that, but I'm assuming you are utilizing that on the backside of your business pretty extensively.
No, the first
Okay.
thing I outsourced in my business was an accountant. The only thing I got out of that half an accounting degree I have is I can quickly count. I can quickly figure out someone's 20% tip in a restaurant. Only skill I got, nothing else.
So, so are you doing your own bookkeeping?
No. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. Bless. I love my accountant. She can have all my money. Please don't make me do it. If it's a piece of paperwork, I'm going to hand it over to her so fast. I'm like, take all my money. Just make the problem go away. Don't make me touch this number.
Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. Since a lot of people have a complete fear of handing anything off, right? I would say that is one of the challenges that many, new entrepreneurs, not just new, a lot of entrepreneurs have, and sometimes it goes on for decades, that they just won't let go of anything and they do everything. And the reality is time's our scarcest resource, right? So how did you have the confidence of saying, okay, this is my lane. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send out emails. I'm going to do this coaching. I'm going to create an app, and all this other stuff I'm just pushing aside and I'm putting on somebody else, and I have the confidence that they're going to do it correctly.
I think it's a lack of confidence in my ability to do accounting correctly, frankly, is how I'm able to outsource that one. Like like I said, I kind of tried when I was like 25, 26, and I was like, I'm going to go to jail. Like, I don't know what to do. I have to hire someone. Like I really felt very inept in that field. And so, I think that's the thing is I don't really want to have an argument with the IRS. And if something goes sideways, I want someone to call who has all of my information to handle that for me. There's other things I have a harder time outsourcing, but I sort of like put parameters on myself because I can learn things quickly. So like, for example, I recently updated all my opt-ins and I wasted a good half a day trying to figure out how to make the opt-ins function and look pretty. And then I was like, wow, I am wildly bad at this. And so then I sent a message to my business coach and I was like, who set yours up? And she was like, here's the name. And again, I was just like, take my money. So I think part of it too is something I guess I've learned is even though I've certainly put money into projects that didn't necessarily pay out the way I would have liked them to, there's always money to be made and money always comes back. And I think that's kind of the thing for me is as much as I have a complicated relationship with money, I'm kind of like, no matter how big the mistake is, the money always comes back in some way. If you know how to do things, how to monetize things, how to create things, you can always find an avenue to do it again, whether you're working for someone else, which I've done some of, right? Like I did the marketing for that reformer company and I ghostwrote that book, or doing it myself with my own brand.
So were some those things going on in parallel while you were running your own business?
Oh yeah. Like I said, everything is always in tandem. So like my daughter was born via surrogacy. And so there was like 8 months where I was like, I don't know what my life is going to look like. I'm not sure what I want to do. And at that point, I had already found myself involved in this. Basically, they sell reformers, which my friend had looped me into at the start of the pandemic. She said, I'm going to do this. And I said, good luck. That sounds hard. And then somehow I ended up working for her. So at the time, I was doing a lot of their marketing and a little bit of my stuff because I didn't really know what I wanted my stuff to be. So I was just kind of like letting my personal brand float along without doing a lot of launching or sales. And then when I knew my daughter was going to be born, I kind of went on, let's call it quote unquote maternity leave for a couple months. So I left the company that I was doing the marketing for. And in that time, that created the space for me to be like, okay, how much of this is going to be me being a parent because I am the primary caretaker? And how much of this is going to be my business? But then kind of around month 2 of quote unquote maternity leave, where I'm hanging out at home with a newborn and my husband, I was like, wow, I have a lot of time. I think I should launch an app-based program. So then I took the membership site that I had shut down and I turned it into an app-based program instead. And then I launched that in the new year. So sometimes when I have space, I just decide to create something. I don't know. I don't do well with too much free time.
Yeah, I don't either. I
We know Tony.
but basically out of that, every time I'm out of a sports coaching season, it's like super risky for me and my family that I will just start some random harebrained thing and we know that I'm not going to stop doing it once I start it. So it's quite the commitment. So talk about I guess, there's the level of maybe being a little neurotic, right? And doing these things. And then there's like, you got to have money to live. So talk a little bit about how having these multiple streams going on, how does that help with your mental security, knowing that, if one doesn't work out, I still have this other thing going and that would give me the cushion to maybe get something else rolling.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I look at it in my brain is I always need some sort of financial base, even if it's project driven, right? So when I was ghostwriting the book, which takes a lot of hours, that was my financial base. So I knew that I could like sell my little things and grow my personal brand on the side, but I had a base there. When I worked for that reformer company, I had a base there. When I launched my membership site, like literally 1 week after COVID started, which was a wild experience. And I realized at that moment that suddenly everyone and their mother had a membership site because now the entire fitness industry is on the internet. I was like, what do people need? They don't know how to sell things on the internet. And I have a whole following of yoga and Pilates teachers. So I'm going to add a second branch to this membership site and do business coaching and consulting. And that became my base for a while. So a lot of it is sort of a combination of like, what is my base? Or if I realize my base is going to fall apart very quickly with the original plan, I kind of look around and I go, well, what can I do with this instead? Now that I have this thing here, like what can I make out of it? Even if it's not necessarily what my original plan was. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of where
yeah, absolutely. So you have your base of, let's call that your flow. And then you kind of have these drips and trickles going on that it sounds like you're very good at turning the valve on and turning a drip or a trickle into a flow, which to me is I mean, that's a valuable skill and not something that's easily done.
And she's good at pivoting.
Yeah.
It sounds like that, which isn't, I'd love to know more about that from you, Nikki, a lot of people get rattled when their flow needs to change, right? Because the flow is typically the reliant piece of your income. And so when that's not working anymore, like you said, a pandemic hits, right? And you have to like change that or whatever the circumstances are. But you've done it multiple times and shifted that flow. So how are you able to do that? Like, how are you able to have the confidence to do that? And how do you move through that, especially in an industry where that's not usually the case with your peers? That very much rattles folks.
I mean, I think part of it comes from like an inherent part of me, which is I have to like what I'm doing. So it's not a practical part of me. It's actually a wildly impractical part of my side of my personality. But then I'm also logical. So it's like I know I have an impractical drive that I now have to back up with something that makes sense on paper. So if we were to sort of reverse engineer this, because believe me, it's not well thought out. It's sort of something I just kind of kept doing over and over. Like for example, I was known as a Pilates teacher. I did a lot of Pilates stuff. And then at a certain point, I got really into strength training. I was like, I really love this. This feels so much more interesting. This is working so well for my body. This is working so well for my clients. This is what I want to talk about. But everyone thinks I'm a Pilates teacher, right? And so the first thing I did was, and then I was also like, I don't have a lot of confidence in my knowledge yet. I haven't been doing this that long, but I have a friend who is good. All she does is strength training. She's brilliant at it. She doesn't use the internet, but I use the internet. So I kind of went to her and I said, hey, do you want to create a strength training program together? And so that was the second program I ever launched on the internet. It started as a push-up program and then it got rebranded because it was still a full body strength program as strength training for yoga and Pilates teachers, because that's what people were looking for. Same program, just different branding on the sales page. So I launched a push-up program with my friend because I knew that her programming would be solid because I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself on that subject matter yet. And so now I'm the person who does Pilates and strength training. And then from there, I was able to sort of shift more and more and more to strength training, where that's all I talked about, and less about Pilates, until by the time that I had gotten to a strength training, I had sold 2 strength training programs. I'd sold sort of these micro programs, right? They're one-offs, they're PDFs, Strength for Hypermobility and this Push It program. And so that's how I was able to sort of merge over there. And then while I was kind of more merged into strength, less into Pilates, then I was able to start talking about nutrition. And then more recently, I've managed to really make that kind of the 2 cornerstones of my brand. So I'm always just kind of like moving one thing off the page as I'm kind of starting to move towards something else. It's kind of the way I would think about it.
So we're getting close on time here, which I'm disappointed because I'm having a blast talking to you.
We'll have her back.
Yeah, and I would love to just talk some fitness and nutrition at some point. But since this is your world, we hear all these things about gut health and I don't know. There's just like a million things you hear out there. But what's the thing that you see most common that people need to do for their nutrition that would improve their health?
I'm going to give the most boring answer anyone has ever heard, which is, as much as like we can focus on these micro topics, right? Like I think gut health is like very specific, and has a place in this conversation like everything does. Really, before we start, and this ties specifically to business too, it's really unhelpful sometimes to focus on grains of sand if you don't have a big rock in place. And so I would say before we start kind of hyper focusing on things like gut health or this or that, I think it's more helpful to go like, okay, what is the challenge that I am trying to solve? And what is a small number of behaviors that I should focus on that are actually going to move me in the direction that I want? Because what happens a lot of the time with nutrition is we're doing so many things. We're tracking all of our macros and we're worried about gut health and this and that. And we've got a million numbers. And so our attention is spread really thin. And it's a little bit like thinking about like if you were trying to clean your house, it's like you did 2 dishes and then you made half the bed and then you cleaned 1/3 of your bathroom and then you started decluttering your closet. And then you go, why don't I have a clean kitchen? it's because your energy is spread too thin. So I think the biggest thing with nutrition is that like we need to stop overcomplicating it. We need sort of a general pattern of eating that is health promoting, which again is real straightforward: carbs, protein, fats, a mix of vegetables and fruits, a decent relationship with food, hopefully, right? And then you can refine, then you can get into the weeds if you're a nerd. But until we have sort of those base things in place, which a lot of us actually kind of struggle with for good reason, we have a lot of competing interests in our lives. I'm not sure we need to start with gut health. You know what I mean? It kind of feels like working backwards a little bit when we do that.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great analogy to, yeah, business, money, all sorts of things.
Thank you, Nikki. We loved having you on. We love all of your stories, and we'll definitely have you back.
I would love that. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for listening today. If you like this episode, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Nikki.